Hello, Namaste. I Nirmala Rawat welcome you to my YouTube channel. Thank you for watching my videos. Today I will be continuing chapter 23, Soma's departure. In previous part we got to know from Anasuya's mother that Sri Ram had visited their home and told them about Anasuya's previous birth as Sitaji's first and closest maid Meenakshi. However, they hid this fact from Anasuya as her father was not happy with her past. Now, moving on, distraught Anasuya talks ahead. Is there anything nobler than serving our Maharani or Maharaja? I exclaimed in disbelief. Nothing. Nothing could make me happier than to know our Maharani had once been my mother, just as she was Soma's. Had I known this, I could have asked Soma about my past. I could have asked so many questions. My voice trailed off. I recognized that I had never stopped thinking of myself as a servant. I remembered how in childhood I had loved to serve my parents and was happiest when I was invisible, unseen, performing the simplest task in the household. My mother shook her head. I am ashamed to say what I just told you, but it is how your father felt and still feels. We will go back to visit Soma, I promise you. My mother took my hand and said, Let us not share this conversation with your father. I nodded. My mind was racing as I now recalled Soma's last words to me. She had told me as much, but now what she had spoken was confirmed by Sri Ram himself. I had no memory of the past or of the exchange between Sri Ram and my father. My only memory was his eyes, eyes that would never leave me. I could not forgive my father for having kept from me Maharaja Ram's great blessing and his revelations about my past. Yet, in order to honor my mother's request, I could not discuss it with him, and so a distance developed between us. He was pleased that I agreed to the marriage and did not take note of my silence in his presence. My mind was far away, and I mentally reviewed again and again the stories we had heard from Soma in the hopes of not forgetting a single word. I continued with my household duties, physically engaged but mentally absent. When one day my father told me I was soon to be meet my future husband, I nodded, not thinking much of it. A few days later, after finishing my chores, one of the household servants accompanied me on my walk down to my favorite spot at the river. I sat there, watching the rushing water, thinking back to the stories Soma had told us. Lost in thought, I suddenly became aware of another presence. Turning, I found a young man standing not far away, looking at me. Seeing that I had noticed him, he introduced himself. I am Ajit, he said in a nervous voice. And I assume you are Anasuya? I went to call upon you at your home, but was told you were here by the river. I nodded, turning my face away. My heart was pounding. I had never been in such a situation before, alone, in the presence of a young man who was not my relative. This was the young man I was destined to marry. May I join you? He asked. I nodded, still not daring to turn my face to him. You have found my favorite spot, he said. This is where I often come to reflect, to sit with the river. I didn't answer. He continued to make conversation. I could hear the tremble in his voice and began to feel badly for him. But I was tongue-tied and could not respond. After speaking for some minutes, he fell silent. I gathered the courage to turn toward him. His eyes were on the river, so I could examine him without him noticing. He was a good-looking young man, nothing extraordinary but fine-featured, and he had kind expressions on his face that caught my attention. This afternoon, sun was pouring down, but we were spared its heat by the shadow of some trees. Suddenly, I noticed that he was staring at a furry animal who seemed to be struggling by the side of the river. That animal might be hurt. I must go to it, he murmured. I watched him as he went over to the animal, who was too injured to run away. He returned and placed the animal on his lap and began to rub its leg. A large bird may have attacked his leg, but I think he will be all right, he said caringly. Then, removing a silver pendant that hung around his neck, he placed it on the animal's leg and closed his eyes for a few minutes, whispering, "Mata's love will heal you." Opening his eyes, he smiled as he saw the animal squirm in an attempt to free itself. Releasing the animal, he said, "There now, you may go on your way." He watched as the animal limped off. I continued to stare at the pendant which he had again placed around his neck. "That pendant you are wearing, where did you get it?" I asked in a shy voice for the first time venturing to speak. "My grandmother gave it to me before she died. I believe it has healing power." "How did your grandmother come by the pendant?" I asked with new interest in him. "There is a long story behind this pendant." "I would like to hear it." "Well, you might not believe this, but it was given to her by the Maharani herself when she returned from the exile. She said that her mother had given it to her when she left Mithila." My mouth dropped open at these words. That was Mata Sita's pendant. "You call her Mata as well?" he asked with a slight laugh. "That is what my grandmother called her Maharani. She had so much love for her. I didn't know why I called Maharani Sita Mata at that moment. I had never done so before, but the word slipped from my mouth, and from that moment forward, that was the only word I used when referring to her. Jai Shri Ram. To understand this part better, to know more about Ajit, watch my previous videos labeled Chapter 4 Part 3, Chapter 17 Part 3 and Part 4. Thank you. Let me know your views in comment section. Jai Shri Ram. Do subscribe if not subscribed. Have a great day.